allegations
questioning.
and have no factual
Mr. Sauer,
thing to pick it up?
the gentlewoman has not been recognized. I'd like, Mr. Sauer, you deposed Dr. Fauci last fall. In that deposition, you asked him the question, you said, is it important for people to have access to both sides of the debate so they can assess what's good information and what's bad information? Remember that question you asked Dr. Fauci? And here was his response. He said, Dr. Fauci said, well, you know, it depends. If information is clearly inadequate and statistically not sound, there can be a danger in people who don't have the ability or the experience to understand. Mr. Sauer, do you forfeit your First Amendment rights if you can't tell good information from bad information? Absolutely. That's not how our First Amendment works, is it? You need to turn on your mic if you can, Mr. Sauer. Is the First Amendment only those for those people who have the ability or experience to understand?
No, it is for all Americans.
All Americans, all 330 million of us, is that right?
That's correct.
Not just for the special people, not just for the super smart people like Dr. Fauci, who worked 40 years in our government, highest paid guy. Not just for them, it's for all of us, right?
Absolutely right.
Even if maybe you don't know the difference sometimes between what's good or bad information, you still have your First Amendment liberties under our Constitution.
Both to hear and to speak, absolutely.
Exactly right. By the way, when you deposed Dr. Fauci, how many times did he happen to say he didn't know or couldn't remember?
He said, I do not recall or variations thereof 174 times, and adding in variations if I don't remember at least 212 times.
Wow. Smartest man on the planet couldn't remember 212 times?
He couldn't remember things, including things that he had told the national media, quote, I remember it very well. Then he would say 16 times, I don't recall details of that meeting.
Now, you, you were near the top of your class at Harvard Law School, Rhodes Scholar, is that right, Mr. Sauer?
I've submitted a biographical statement.
Yeah. Well, I looked at your biography. It's pretty impressive. Is that pretty high? You've done a lot of depositions. You've done a lot of legal work. You've deposed a lot of people. Is 212 times pretty high?
I've taken dozens of depositions. I've never seen anything like it, including in this case where other federal government witnesses frequently profess inability to recall.
So the guy who told us all these things, who's, you know, the smartest man on the planet, he set a record. Highest you've ever seen and couldn't recall, didn't remember?
I've never seen anything like it.
Okay, page 4 of your testimony, you talk about the censorship enterprise. You give a bunch of facts and numbers here. You said Twitter disclosed that 84 government officials communicated with them, or as Mr. Seligman said, gave them suggestions. 84 federal officials gave Twitter suggestions on tweets and things to take down. 45 officials in the federal government told the same thing to Facebook. Is that right?
They discussed disinformation and censorship with those officials.
Yeah, a handful of federal agencies handed over 20,000 pages of documents in the communications they had with these big tech companies. Again, just suggestions, though, according to Mr. Seligman. 20 White House officials were involved in these suggestions to these social media platforms.
That's conservative. It's probably higher.
Yeah. FBI agent Elvis Chan testified the FBI alone sends encrypted lists to social media accounts, sometimes containing hundreds of accounts and URLs in each list to platforms for censorship 1 to 5 times per month. 500 times a month, 500 different email or websites, everything else they're sending to these social media platforms. The FBI, and Mr. Seligman says, don't worry, that's not a problem with the First Amendment. That's a suggestion.
Yes, over the course of years, that's been occurring.
The Election Integrity Partnership, a censorship consortium of academics, think tanks, federal and state government officials, social media platforms boast that it surveilled 859 million tweets, 21,897,364 tweets on tickets as misinformation. Is that right?
That's correct.
You learned this in your discovery in your lawsuit so far?
Correct, Your Honor.
And the Virality Project, a mass surveillance and censorship operation conducted by the EIP, has done over 6.7 million engagements on social media, 200 million. Now, let me just ask you this. Were most of those targets towards conservatives?
Virtually everything we've seen in evidence so far, or at least the vast majority of what we've seen in so far, is conservative, right-leaning speech.
But you would be just as outraged. I read your testimony. You'd be just as outraged if it was the other way around, right?
Absolutely.
Same here. Same here. Because the First Amendment, again, is not just for some people, not just for one political persuasion, not just for the so-called smart people like Dr. Fauci. It's for 330-some million Americans. That's how our Constitution works. Is that right, Mr. Sauer?
Every single American.
I thank the gentleman for his answers.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Gentleman from Louisiana is recognized.
Seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter dated January 12, 2021 by Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry, where he decries all political violence and calls for an end to that and asks for respect for all political viewpoints.
Without objection.
Another
so
thing
entered.
we can examine because he's not here. Very
No,
good.
you can
Thank
examine
you.
it. It's a document. He's going to
No,
enter into the
examine
record.
him for what he wrote and the intent behind what he said.
Well, I would
But,
just,
okay.
I would
Go
just
on.